I think sometimes artists are showing what's happening in the zeitgeist like way before society realizes it's a problem or something affecting them. So yeah, I mean, music is so powerful, and I really hope, and I feel like maybe after, the initial first half of the pandemic, I think we did see a lot of people be like, oh, what the heck? I'm going to say my views and I'm going to stand up for what I think is ethical. And I don't
Yes.
care if this makes me lose followers or whatever. Who cares anymore? Half the world's dying. Like, I'm going to use music for, in my opinion, one of the things it's intended to do, which is to take care of people and encourage people to do that.
Welcome to Why Not Both, the podcast all about how our multiple passions shape our identity and our lives. I'm your host, Pam Schaefer, and our producer is Laura Studeris. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. If you like what you hear, you can head over to our Patreon to support us directly and get transcripts of all of our episodes. Or you can come hang out with us on your favorite social media platforms, where we can be found under WNB the podcast. For this episode, we were fortunate to get to spend some time with the musician and activist S.G. Goodman. I hope that you enjoy our chat. Welcome to Why Not Both, where I will make the interview as fast as possible because, oh my gosh, you've got a lot going on, which is hilariously on point for the podcast itself.
Perfect. Glad to be on brand.
I was going to say, it's literally all about how to juggle the multiple things that one does and how that informs your sense of who you are. So I'm like, no, that's like, that is what we
Perfect.
talk about.
Good. Perfect.
What's the showcase that you're doing tonight?
It is sponsored by Big Feet PR. They're my publicity firm, and it's also sponsored by Gibson. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, excited about it. Americana Fest is a bit of a, it's a rough week. It's a lot. It's fun and it's intense. And I was just in Nashville last night, and this is the first time I've been near my house in over a month. So it's kind of torture being 2 hours away from my own bed. So I drove back last night after an event, and I'll have to stay the night there tonight. I have too much stuff early in the day, but then I'll get to come back tomorrow late afternoon and hopefully have nearly a day off on Wednesday. Or no, tomorrow's Wednesday. I will semi have a day off tomorrow. I'll at least get to be at home. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like you live kind of like proximal to where you end up working a whole lot. And I've talked to a lot of people that kind of like moved during the last few years to be kind of
hmm
like not in city centers, but kind of like close to city centers. Like, is that why you chose where you live, or is this where you're originally from, or?
Yeah, this is I live in Murray, Kentucky, which is about 2 hours out of Nashville, and it's where I went to college. It's about an hour from where I grew up. Um, I love Western Kentucky. I love Kentucky in general. And just different circumstances made me stay here. It's a quiet town. I love New York City. I love certain big cities. But I'm a country girl, and I like living in rural places, and so I'm here, and it makes sense. It makes financial sense too. And I'm never at home. So even I do work in Nashville, and it's convenient to be so close at this, in this particular week. But I stay out of there as much as I can.
Yes. Yes.
hmm
Are you often, when you said like you're never home, like are you often on tour? Like what are you usually balancing kind of like commitment wise?
Oh yeah. So I've been on tour. I've been out straight for over 30 something days now. I had about one night at home between a month long West Coast tour. Um, and then a festival run that I just did. And so I just got home um, 2 days ago
Yeah.
and got to spend the night. But then I had yesterday, so I got home on Sunday and went to an event last night in Nashville. Went to Lucinda Williams Troubadour Award ceremony, which was really awesome. Um, and then I have a full week of Americana Fest and then Bourbon and Beyond Festival. I will have about 2 nights at home after that, I think. Maybe just one, but I hope two. And then I'm leave until the middle of October.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I've been pretty much on the road solid or at least doing business since last August straight. I had a tour cancel in early January, and so I got to be at home. But because I was putting out my record, there was a lot of business I had to do in New York City and different things early as late January. So
Yeah.
so I've just been it's I feel like I've been, after August, I feel like I've been gone for a solid year almost, is what I feel like.
Wow.
I definitely feel that way.
And especially hearing that you like kind of having it sounds almost like your sanctuary where you are. Like, especially knowing that you wanted to be home for that night, I was like, oh, that must be a very important place to be by contrast.
It's so important. My cat is here and he basically lives here while I'm gone. I have a rotating cast of people that come in and care for him. He's deaf and is kind of a hellraiser, and he this house is basically his. And then my dog, he has diabetes and can't stay here. He needs a little more attention than the cat.
Yeah.
So he stays with my parents. So I'm an animal person and I don't have I can't take them. I'm not on a bus, so I can't
Right.
have my animals with me. And I don't get, you don't get to spend a lot of time in nature. And I like to sit out on my back porch. And yes, I'm a big alone time person.
Mm-hmm.
And even if, like, I just did a West Coast run, completely solo by myself. And I just didn't get enough alone time,
Yeah.
even with that.
Yeah. Well, and it's different even when you're I just thought of that stretch of California between kind of like the Bay Area and Oregon. Driving on that stretch is weird alone time because it feels like you're in a screensaver. There's like a good 5 hours of
Hmm.
California that look like you look out the window and you're like, have I moved at all?
Oh Lord, yes.
Like,
I was on the road with last fall with Madison Cunningham and my good friend Tim Payton. I brought him out on the West Coast side of that tour to help sell merch and help drive. I was pretty concerned
yeah.
about all of us being able to, pitch in and drive all that, even though I just did the same run completely by myself.
Yes.
And so now I'm like, whatever. But we were going through Kansas and he said, Kansas, it looks like a big old copy and paste. I just thought, I was like, wow, that is really something. Anyway,
that's
yeah.
that's the
Oh,
best way to
Kansas,
put that. Looks like a big old copy and paste.
just like a big old copy and paste. Unlike the West, I feel like I have PTSD from all the beauty I was exposed to. I was like, oh God, another overwhelmingly beautiful sight. Oh God, another one. I was just like, shit. It was a lot. But
People, it's funny when I was thinking of place and kind of like the sanctity of being in your own home, like having your own space, having that alone time. Like, I'm from Los Angeles and I still
mm-hmm.
live here and like travel around
Mm,
California a lot. And people are always like, oh, why do you stay in California? It's expensive, often on fire, quite
mm-hmm.
literally. And then I'm just like, well, have you driven around the state? Like,
Yeah.
it's like
Oh,
every moment you're just like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
I mean, it's unbelievably beautiful. I can't breathe there. It's too dry for me. Like, I'm definitely genetically meant to be on this side of the Mississippi River, but I mean, undeniably a gorgeous state. So I get it. I'm very partial to the landscape of where I'm from, much different, but I could see if you were used to looking out your window and getting to experience that kind of thing, then it would be hard to find home anywhere else.
Yeah, like you look around other places, and I hadn't realized how almost kind of like singular and strange Los Angeles was until I started traveling more, and then was like, oh, this is why everyone thinks this is like the Wizard of Oz. Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
this scans. and
Yeah.
and like it's interesting thinking about how place then informs like the things that you make and kind of,
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, do you feel that where you're from informs your creativity and informs kind of like your own inspiration and things that you choose to do?
Absolutely. I mean, I draw from my surroundings all the time, and I think in the same way, you had kind of an epiphany about, after removing yourself from Los Angeles, you were able to see it maybe from an outsider's perspective, and you know, um, I think at different moments that kind of the same thing happened to me, of understanding that there's a lot of things about my particular area of the world or upbringing that are other to people, and but are so rich and steeped in beauty that it's kind of like a never-ending well of imagery, circumstance, characters to draw from. And it's one, I think, and we see it kind of pop culture right now, like the South and rural stuff is pretty popular. I don't have a TV, I don't watch any of these shows, but I have heard, that like Ozarks, these like kind of rural stuff. There's like a big Montana one out now. Like, what's that called? Yellowstone, that one. Like, where they're all kind of like doing like rural stuff.
I
I mean,
must
that's not,
confess, I too don't have a television, and so I'm so glad. I'm like,
well,
yes,
they're
another person
big.
that does not have a TV.
There are massive shows currently. Like, country is cool, and Hollywood's capitalizing on it right now, and it's interesting. But you know, I think the South and rural places, in a way, have always embodied like a big mystery to people. And I'm just kind of honored to have been raised here, brought up here, cut my teeth here, enough to be able to claim it for myself and try to convince people, why they should look at it my way a little bit.
I love that. Like the
Thank you.
evocative nature of where one is from and then being able to share that with others. Like you had said, like the imagery, and even when you said about like the dryness of California versus not,
Hmm.
like it made me think of, there was a time that I visited an ex's family in rural Louisiana, and I had never been
No.
there. And one, my hair, it was so big. My
Yeah.
hair became big and full of secrets.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know myself when I shower out in the West because my hair is big too. And, Lord, but out there, it's just, I hate it. Beautiful, not for me. You know what I'm saying? We can say that. And I'm sure maybe you thought that about Louisiana. Maybe you were like, okay, beautiful, I get it. Not for me. That's fine. We can all admit when something's not for us. And
Exactly. It
anything
was,
over the Mississippi, not
you're
for me.
like, not for me. And that feeling of resonance of for me or not for me. Like I remember being there and being like, I wasn't sure if it was for me or not for me because it was so curious. Like the air tasted different. My
Mm-hmm.
hair huge, my arms covered in bug bites.
Oh,
Like the
yeah.
sounds of cicadas, very novel to Pam. Like all of these things were
Mm-hmm.
happening that like, and I can definitely, it almost felt like the weather there and the nighttime there felt like Victorian wallpaper, where there are these all these little intricate
Mm-hmm.
doodads that you could just look at the patterns forever. Like that's how it felt there. And so when you said that there's mysteries and imagery, I was just like, oh yeah, I could totally see that. Even just sitting on the porch at night, that's what it felt like.
Yeah, for sure. It's just, it's the air's thick, the accent is thick. There's a lot of amazing things. The food culture here is thick. A lot of things obviously are steeped in really terrible parts of human history. Um, And the South is really kind of a symbol of how like really terrible things can provide like amazing things for us to all enjoy and see humanity in each other, like a way for just, you know, like our food systems or whatever, you know, now so many people get to enjoy things that have come out of the South and also understand the dark and really cruel history that brought those things about.
Yeah.
And they also have seen the resilience of progressives in the South. You know, I was speaking
Yes.
with someone earlier and they were like, "Do you feel like the South is changing or whatever?" I said, "Well, I can tell you this. I think the way people from the outside are changing the way they look at the South. I think we've had so much
Mm.
attention with the progressive, you know, actions around here. We're finally maybe the rest of the world is finally starting to see the South as a place that one has been doing work for a long time, very complex, but also, you know, not cutting us out on making a difference
Yeah.
and having views that people don't really think that we do. We do, you know? So
Yeah, and
pretty
that
cool.
I was gonna say, as a touring artist, you have the opportunity to actually share that experience with people outside of the South as someone from the South, imbued in
Hmm.
that culture. To, instead of like outside looking in, it's like you're like, okay, I'm an insider. Here, let me give you the perspective from here.
Yeah, it's you know, it's but at the same time, like, you know, the South is a very big, diverse place. I have a lot in common with people from the region, and then there's a lot of things I don't have in common with people. It's just, you know, my home state, Eastern Kentucky, was hit by really catastrophic flooding just a little bit ago.
Yeah.
So when I was out on tour with John Moreland out west, I like to use my platform to say, it's possible you've heard about this, but I'd like to bring it back to your attention. Maybe find a place to give some mutual aid to or whatever. Um, but then at the same time, even though I'm probably more affected by Appalachian culture, region, tradition than most, I was born and raised on the Mississippi Delta. You know, those are kind of different traditions in different areas, definitely different landscapes. You know, so I was propositioned not too long ago to do some rural organizing and help campaign against JD Vance, who's running in
Hmm.
Ohio. And, you know, I was like, I would be glad to help, but I'm not going to say that I'm an Appalachian. You know,
Mm. Hmm.
I'm not. I'm from Kentucky, but you know, I'm not from Appalachia. I might live there one day, but it's not. I'm like Mississippi Delta. I'm raised on Mississippi. Farmers are there, but so there's a lot of complexity where even Southerners can't own every little aspect of Southern identity because it's so vast
Right.
and so, you know, complex. But it's a great place to be, and I'm always inspired. And the people here are just as complex and beautiful as the imagery, to be honest.
What is your experience with organizing and campaigning? That's fascinating to me that I was like, oh, someone reached out to you for that. Like, tell me more about that.
Well, I've been involved in like anything from student government to organizing on campus since I was, you know, first a student at my university and even on back in high school or something like that. It's always been an interest of mine. Um, but I started working with ruralorganizing.org during the Andy BeShear campaign. You know, we have a Democratic governor in an all red state right now. It was no small feat to get him elected. And I worked with a group of other organizers and helped organize a team out of volunteers that would help us reach out to people to try to get visibility for Andy BeShear. And there's a lot of interesting things about that experience that it's a different, it's when we were talking about insider outsider, if you were to call a little lady from Kentucky, like a little old lady, and you called her on the phone, and you're like, "Hi, can I speak to Gloria?" She would know immediately that you weren't someone she knew.
Right.
But when I call someone from Kentucky and I say, "Yeah, is Jim there?" or something like that. So I kind of helped get everybody off the script and say, don't talk to these people like, don't read from a script. Just call somebody up, like they're your uncle or something. And if you can get past that first like 5 seconds, then
Mm-hmm.
more than likely they're going to talk to you. I mean, definitely, we were hung up a lot. It's a very divided state in certain things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I learned so much, and I did a campaign after Charles Booker lost against Amy McGrath to run as our Democratic candidate against Mitch McConnell.
Mm-hmm.
I got on the Amy McGrath campaign, but I still really love Charles Booker and just so am rooting for him and trying to do everything I can for him against Rand Paul. But we were able to do a live stream, a large live stream to encourage Kentuckians to register to vote. And we did it under the name Which Side Are You On, which is an old protest song written by a Kentucky woman, Florence Reese. So these
Wow.
are all things I'm super passionate about and love. At one time more than now, music was a force for social change. And I think it still has the power to do that. You just got to do it. So,
I completely agree. I
mm-hmm,
was thinking about that music and art are so often the first things that are potentially attacked or censored culturally. And
mm-hmm,
I do believe that it is because they do have the power to enact change, even just the act of being able to create. Because so often,
mm-hmm,
if people are oppressed and censored to a certain degree, like you don't have time to create, or you might not have energy to create. Whereas if you
mm-hmm.
do have that time and energy, that's like, I mean, it's strange to use the word resistance in this context, but it's like, it's a form of resisting oppression or fighting against oppression because it's even saying, hey, I'm taking up this space, I'm making art.
Exactly. And I think sometimes artists are showing what's happening in the zeitgeist, like way before society realizes it's a problem or something affecting them. So yeah, I mean, music is so powerful, and I really hope, and I feel like maybe after the initial first half of the pandemic, I think we did see a lot of people be like, "Oh, what the heck? I'm gonna say my views, and I'm gonna stand up for what I think is ethical, and I don't care if
Yes.
this makes me lose followers or whatever." Who cares anymore? Half the world's dying. Like, I'm going to use music for, in my opinion, one of the things it's intended to do, which is to take care of people and encourage people to do that. So,
Yes.
yeah, I'm hoping that's a trend that sticks around. And yeah, it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. That I love what you just said that people are like, I'm going to say my views and I'm going to speak about what I believe in. And if I lose followers, like, so be it. It's that whole thing of like, if everybody likes you, like, does anyone like you?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah. Hmm.
someone commented on, I posted a clip of a music video I made, and someone commented on the YouTube, like, wow, you sure want attention. And I commented back, like, yeah, so I'm posting my music on the internet. Like, you
Yeah.
solved the mystery.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I know. It's so strange how people are literally just sitting around like and feel the freedom to just say the worst things to people. I mean, that in my opinion is just like, are you 14? It's just really strange, but that's one of the downsides. Sitting behind a screen gives people a lot of courage.
yes, yes. And potentially, what is, trying to remember the name of that thing where, which is funny about what I'm going to say. It's like the bell curve of like your perceived competency, like your internal perception of your competency. That people who
Hmm.
have average competency believe themselves to be very competent, and people who are very, very competent actually doubt themselves because they know just how competent you have to be very, very competent. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's a bit of that you're like sitting behind the screen being like, I know what'll get this random musician on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. I got you.
Got
Never,
you now.
never heard or thought of this one before. I know. Gosh.
And like I do the same thing with my music online where often I'll use it to fundraise for things that I want to donate money towards. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, you are correct. I am doing this exactly for attention. Please pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to this thing that I have
Yeah.
now called your attention to with this art.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
and
So nuts.
so it's so strange. And like I do think that like art and music do tend to be about, like you said, things in the cultural zeitgeist. And thinking back to what you said about these shows that now are featuring the South and people's even perceptions of the South. And I thought of like there was a big spate of Viking shows too. It seems like there's always these like either locations or mythologies that people like latch onto and are just like, yes, this one, yoink. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm curious for you, like, and especially you brought up like the different parts of yourself based on where you were raised, but also by whom you were raised. And it's like that
Mm-hmm.
those are almost two different cultures. And I'm curious, like, which parts do you feel like are speaking the most through your current art?
Um, I think it would be a mixture of both. Um, I come from like a strict church family, farmer's daughter, very old school in beliefs and thoughts, but at the same time, I come from sharecroppers. We take care of people who have helped us, or we feel indebted to that have helped our family. So I feel like a lot of the songs off the new record, Teeth Marks, have a lot to do with questioning your empathy or what you're choosing to do with it or how you're processing it or if you didn't experience it from someone else. And it's strange, like my dad, my whole family has always been, I remember this one Thanksgiving in particular, uh, my whole family farms, like extended and everything. And my uncle was driving through, we call it the bottoms. It's like large amounts of farmland by the Mississippi River. And next thing I know, at my grandmother's house, there was a lady I didn't know there, and she was pretty dirty. And I didn't, we didn't know what was going on. And then the grown ups were kind of in the corner, like saying, we're going to get her a meal and whatever. And this lady had been sleeping in these barns and was trying to get to, Florida. She was hitchhiking, she was homeless.
Oh,
And this was like one of the first homeless people I'd ever come in contact with. I was a young child, and I live in a place where you there is homelessness, but you don't see it like that.
yeah.
And so I was like, wait a minute, she's just living in the like a barn down there. And I remember my grandmother just told my uncle, like, here's money, buy her a train ticket to Florida and just get her down there. It's like
Hmm.
people that just teach you like to care for your neighbors. No one is you know everybody's got their own struggles. You don't have to ask questions. You just, there is nothing wrong with feeding people, making sure they have what they
Right.
need and send them on their way. And I think seeing that type of compassion and stuff from a family and just kind of being raised to take care of other people, it definitely affects the way I see the world and what I choose to find really offensive about the world, you know?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that does definitely come out in my music, or at least the way songs start shaping in my head. What's making me take a second glance?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that makes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sense. Like now that you like hearing that story, that makes so much sense with more like community organizing and campaigning of like wanting to share that goodwill. Like you said, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with feeding someone, with caring for someone. And that in some ways I was thinking about, like, I haven't watched the shows that are out on the South. Um
Well, some of those I don't think are like
yeah.
one's in Montana, and I don't consider
Yeah.
Montana the South, but
Yeah.
like it's just more like a cultural. They're more like rural,
Yeah.
like the idea of rural people, non like no like out of the metro stuff.
Yeah. Because from what you're describing, it seems like almost the same thing, like you said, of like when I stepped outside of LA, where it's like people have like preconceived notions about who you are based on where you're from and what it might be like, despite having never been there and not experiencing that culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's true.
Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
like especially hearing about that, like that actually sounds a lot more like the culture in which I was raised. Like in like Reform Jewish culture, there's like a huge emphasis on like tzedakah and like giving to your community and caring for
Mm-hmm.
people. And like every week we would gather either like tzedakah in the form of money, and then like donate to like food banks, or you would donate like clothes, you would donate like all sorts of goods. But it's like the kind of thing of like it's part of the thing to take care of people in your community, no matter who that person
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, yeah, like that's very much like a value that I was raised with. And I think that there might be people who don't have that perception either of like the Jewish community in Los Angeles or like the rural community in Kentucky, that it's like people might like not perceive our communities that way.
Exactly. Yeah, because a lot of people would say that places like rural, like Kentucky or whatever, might be more in line with like rugged individualism, and it is
Right.
definitely here. But there is a deep, deep sense of taking care of each other in these
Yeah.
places. And to the extent where I think when outsiders come and experience it, they're like, wait a minute, you're getting way too far into my business. You know what I mean? It's like, okay. But, and it's so, I mean, I've been with people who get offended when I offer things, like, oh no, I'll come and pick them up. And they're like, no, you won't. That's weird.
Right.
That's weird. You don't offer that kind of stuff. I'm like, why not? I don't care. They're good. They're your
Right.
people. They're my people. And they're like, no, you don't do that. They can do it
Right.
themselves. It's like, okay, whatever. It's fine.
Yeah. That was how I knew that a friend of mine was like finally trusted me when I offered to
Mm-hmm.
pick him up from LAX, and he was like, "Okay."
Oh, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because I think in some ways, like people have to, if someone hasn't been raised like that, like they have to trust that, like, and I don't know what happens in other places. I would assume that if someone doesn't trust, it's because they've had a bad experience with someone offering something, and either they're beholden for some reason or there's a negative consequence of accepting that. It's like thinking of like, doing a deal with a fae. But it's like, and then if
Yeah.
someone offers something good, they're like, what's the catch? Like,
Yeah,
is it a
for
trap?
sure. Yep. I know. It's complex. People are, and that's okay. That's what makes the world interesting, I guess. But
Yes. Yes. And I was curious, even when you mentioned those phone conversations, the people that didn't hang up, like once you got past that 5 seconds, I'm curious, like, what were some of the conversations that you ended up having? Like, what were people's perceptions? What were different people's ideas?
well, something that I would bring up, and I only have a couple more minutes. I'm sorry, I
Yes,
got to run to
that's
Nashville.
okay.
But
That's
um,
okay.
but to answer this, um, one question I would ask, because Andy BeShear and the governor who was before him, Matt Bevin, he did a lot of cutting to teachers' pensions and
Mm.
actually really stripped a lot of our public university of funds to where they had to like get rid of whole departments.
Oh
So he wasn't
no.
very pro public education and definitely was not up for helping out teachers. Well, guess who pretty much everyone in the world has known a teacher? And more than likely, one teacher made an impact on someone's life, right? So
Yeah.
So knowing that common ground, no matter if I was talking to a Republican, because what you found when we had like all the Democratic Party's numbers or whatever. Well, you would find that in the last few years, a lot of them were no longer Democrats. So you were talking to someone who had like probably voted for Trump or
Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but you can still find common ground with people. And one thing I would ask them is, sir, do you have any teachers in your life? And they might be like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, my daughter is a teacher. I said, well, are you aware that this is what's been happening to the teachers in our state? And guess what? He cared then. He didn't care about
Yeah.
about which party was representing or whatever, but he really cared about the teachers in our state. And so I think it's like knowing who your neighbors are, knowing what matters to them, knowing where you can find common ground. These are all ways, that I think it's important to look at humanity in
Right.
general. Like, how can I make a connection with you to where what I say you don't write off? And I think it's
Yeah.
just about having the will to find that common ground. And so that's what I tried to focus on in those conversations. You're not going to convince someone of something different, but you can find common ground,
Right.
you know?
And through that common ground, then both of you come away potentially with like a revised view on your own perspective because you were able to
Exactly.
find that like synthesis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't going to walk away from that situation thinking like, oh, this person doesn't care about other humans or whatever. Or
Yeah.
they don't have empathy. This party, this people, whatever, they don't have empathy for their neighbors or whatever. That's not how it works,
Right.
and that's not what's true of the situation, even as polarized as it is right now. So,
Right. Right,
mm,
because everyone, if you fall into that mentality of kind of like almost dehumanizing someone on either side, then it's like, how are you going to connect? How's anything going to get done?
exactly. And I mean, that's why I don't choose to focus on that. I try to find the common ground and also present that in my music. And I'm happy to be able to do that. So,
I love that, and I love that
thank
that is how
you.
you're spending your time doing that in multiple realms.
I appreciate it. Well, it's been so awesome getting to talk to you, and I'm so sorry I have a whole week of Americana Fest I have to go to.
Go
But
forth. Given that I have one of my friends was like, "Wow, you look like a Backstreet Boy," and I was just like, "Okay, I need a haircut."
what? Oh, it looks good. It looks good.
I usually have
But
like bangs, and now I have whatever is
it's
happening
great.
here.
I
Thank
like it.
you.
Like we kind of got the same thing.
The little fringe. I was like, so I
Yep.
feel you. Go get glam. Go have an amazing time.
Thank
I
you.
hope the drive is not too horrible.
I appreciate it. I
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of Why Not Both. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who is literally a rock star. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.